The day I accidentally walked into Kang Ji-hoon's private bathroom and saw the scars covering his chest like a roadmap of violence, I should have looked away, apologized, and pretended it never happened. That's what a good maid would do. Instead, I found myself staring at the most powerful man in Seoul as he clutched the sink, blood seeping through bandages he'd clearly applied himself, and heard myself say, "You're going to get an infection if you don't clean that properly." What I didn't know was that those words would shatter his most sacred rule, never let anyone close enough to matter. What I definitely didn't know was that falling for your employer when he's Korea's most dangerous crime boss tends to complicate things in ways that could get you killed. My name is Sara Williams, and 6 months ago I was desperate enough to take a job I knew was dangerous. When the International Employment Agency said private household staff for a prominent Seoul businessman, I should have asked more questions. When they mentioned the salary, enough to pay off my mother's medical debt and still have money left over, I should have walked away. When they required a background check more thorough than most government jobs, I should have recognized the red flags. Instead, I signed the paperwork because my mother's cancer treatments had bankrupted our family, and desperation makes you cross oceans. The Kang estate in Gangnam looked like something from a Korean drama, all minimalist architecture and bulletproof glass, surrounded by walls that could stop a tank. The staff quarters were nicer than my apartment back in Chicago, and the kitchen had equipment worth more than my entire nursing school tuition. But it was the rules that told me everything I needed to know about my new employer. Rule 1. No personal questions. Ever. Rule 2. No unauthorized entry into the master suite. Rule 3. No discussion of household affairs with outsiders. Rule 4. Absolute discretion regarding all visitors and activities. Rule 5. No romantic attachments within the household. The last rule was printed in bold, underlined twice, with a note that violations resulted in immediate termination and additional consequences. I met Kang Ji-hoon on my 3rd day, when I was cleaning his office and he walked in covered in what I was pretty sure was someone else's blood. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp features that belonged in magazines, if magazines featured men whose eyes held the weight of things better left unspoken. "You're the American," he said, not looking at me directly. "Yes, sir. Sara Williams. I'll finish this later if you need privacy." Continue. He moved to his desk, favoring his left side slightly. "Your Korean is better than expected." "I studied it in college, sir. And I've been practicing since I arrived." He paused, something flickering across his expression, surprise, maybe, that a black American woman had bothered to learn his language properly. "The blood comes out with hydrogen peroxide and cold water. Heat sets protein stains permanently." I paused in my dusting, processing this casual advice about cleaning blood from someone who clearly had extensive experience with the subject. "Thank you, sir. I'll remember that." That was our first real conversation. Professional, distant, exactly what the rules demanded. For 6 weeks, I maintained perfect professional boundaries. I cleaned his spaces when he wasn't there, prepared meals according to dietary restrictions that suggested chronic pain management, and pretended not to notice when he limped more heavily on days the weather changed. The other Korean staff treated me with polite distance, not unfriendly, but clearly aware that I was foreign, different, temporary. The household ran like clockwork. Mr. Kang's associates came and went at all hours, dangerous men in expensive suits who spoke in the kind of code that made my blood freeze. I learned to be invisible during meetings, to clean around conversations about territorial adjustments and permanent solutions to personnel problems. I was just the maid. Foreign, invisible, irrelevant. Until that Thursday morning when everything changed. I'd entered his bathroom to replace towels, part of my regular routine when he was supposedly at his office. But he was there, standing shirtless at the sink, trying to change bandages on wounds that looked fresh and serious. The scars were extensive, covering his torso like a map of violence survived. Bullet wounds, knife marks, what looked like burns from cigarettes or torture. But it was the fresh injury that made my breath catch, a deep gash along his ribs that was clearly infected, angry red and weeping despite his amateur medical efforts. "Sir, I started to back out, but he swayed slightly, gripping the marble counter. "You need stitches," I said before I could stop myself. "And antibiotics." "That's badly infected." He looked at me in the mirror, his expression unreadable. "It's fine." "No, it's not." The words came out sharper than intended, but I'd spent 2 years in nursing school before dropping out to care for my mother. I knew infection when I saw it. "When did you last clean it properly?" "With actual medical supplies, not whatever you've been using?" "Sara." His voice carried a warning. "You could die from sepsis." I stepped closer, my training warring with basic human decency. "I know about wound care. I was in nursing school before I had to leave. Let me help." For a long moment, we stared at each other in the mirror. Him shirtless and vulnerable, me in my plain uniform with my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither wanted to cross. "Rule 5, he said quietly. "This isn't romantic attachment. This is basic medical care." I moved to his medicine cabinet, finding the supplies I knew would be there. Any man with his scars kept serious first aid equipment. "Sit on the bench. Let me see how bad it is." He should have refused. Should have reminded me of my place, of the boundaries that kept his world from touching mine. Instead, he sat, watching me with dark eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. The wound was worse up close, deep enough to need professional medical attention, infected enough to be dangerous. But as I cleaned it with proper antiseptic, applied antibiotic ointment, and covered it with sterile gauze, I felt him gradually relax under my touch. "Where did you learn this?" he asked as I secured the bandage. "Nursing school, then cancer ward. 8 months of watching professionals work while my mother received treatment." I kept my voice steady, professional. "You pick things up when someone you love is dying and you can't afford to miss anything." "Your mother?" "Died 4 months ago. Medical bills are the reason I'm here instead of finishing school." I stepped back, noting how much better the wound looked already. "This needs to be checked daily and redressed every 48 hours. "You have antibiotics?" He nodded toward the medicine cabinet, and I found prescription bottles with names I recognized. "Take these as directed. All of them. Stopping early is how you develop resistant infections." "Sara." Something in his tone made me meet his eyes. There was vulnerability there, confusion, as if basic human care from a Black American woman was something he'd never experienced. "Thank you." "You're welcome, sir." I left him sitting there, shirtless and bandaged, looking more human than dangerous for the first time since I'd met him. That should have been the end of it. One moment of human kindness that we'd both pretend never happened. Instead, it became our routine. Every other day, he'd find excuses to need my help with the wound care. A torn stitch here, a concerning discoloration there. We'd meet in his bathroom, where he'd sit patiently while I cleaned and redressed injuries that were healing better than they had any right to. Gradually, our conversations expanded beyond medical necessities. "You were studying nursing before coming here?" he asked during week 3 of our informal medical appointments. "Northwestern University. Was going to specialize in oncology." I applied fresh gauze with practiced efficiency. Had to drop out when the insurance stopped covering my mother's treatments. "You wanted to save people like her. Wanted to make sure other families didn't lose everything trying to keep someone alive." I secured the bandage, noting how the inflammation had decreased. This is healing well. Another week and you won't need daily care. Something flickered across his expression, disappointment, maybe, or concern about losing this strange intimacy we'd developed. What if I told you the medical debt could disappear? He asked quietly. I paused in my cleanup. Sir? Your mother's hospital bills. The collection agencies calling your family, the liens on your father's house. I could make them disappear. The offer hung between us like a loaded gun. I knew what men like him expected in return for such generosity, knew the price of accepting help from someone whose business operated outside the law. What would you want in return? His jaw tightened. Nothing you're not freely willing to give. And if I'm not willing to give anything? Then the offer stands anyway. He stood, moving carefully to protect his healing injury. Your mother received excellent care at Northwestern Memorial. The doctors there remember her, speak highly of her strength, her grace in facing terminal illness. My breath caught. You investigated my family? I investigate everyone in my household. But your mother. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. They said she spent her final weeks comforting other patients, sharing her faith, helping families cope with loss even while facing her own death. Tears stung my eyes. She did. Always said God gave her cancer for a reason, maybe to help other people find peace. Perhaps healing runs in your family. The words were said so quietly I almost missed them, but they hit me like lightning. Because I realized he wasn't talking about my mother's patients. He was talking about himself. Ji-hoon. His name slipped out before I could stop it, intimate and soft. His eyes snapped to mine, something raw and hungry flickering there before he shuttered it behind professional distance. Rule 5, Sara. Rules can be changed. Not these rules. Not for people like me. He moved toward the door, putting space between us. The debt disappears regardless. No strings attached. I owe you that much for keeping me from dying of sepsis. He left me standing there, understanding for the first time that Kang Ji-hoon's most sacred rule wasn't about maintaining professional boundaries. It was about protecting himself from exactly what was happening between us. Over the next month, our relationship shifted into something more complex, more dangerous. He found reasons to be around when I was working, reviewing papers in his office while I cleaned, checking inventory in the kitchen while I prepared meals. We developed an easy rhythm of conversation that felt natural despite the absolute insanity of the circumstances. I learned about his organization in careful details. Import and export businesses that moved more than legitimate cargo. Protection services for businesses in dangerous neighborhoods. Financial enterprises that operated in legal gray areas but provided services traditional banks wouldn't. It's not what people think, he told me one evening when I was preparing dinner and he was pretending to work at the kitchen island. We don't deal drugs to children or traffic people. Some lines can't be crossed. What lines can be crossed? I asked, seasoning the soup with skills I'd learned from my grandmother back in Chicago. Violence against people who choose this world knowing the risks. Theft from those who've built wealth by exploiting others. Bending rules that protect the corrupt while punishing the desperate. I glanced at him, noting the way his shoulders had relaxed over these weeks of regular medical care and honest conversation. You sound like you're trying to convince yourself you're not a monster. Aren't I? The vulnerability in his question made my chest ache. Monsters don't spend their evenings learning about their foreign employees' dreams. Monsters don't make sure their staff have health insurance and fair wages. Monsters don't create rules to protect the people around them from getting hurt. The rules protect them from me. The rules protect you from caring about them. I turned to face him fully. There's a difference. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant he realized what was happening between us was beyond his control. Sara. I know. Rule 5. I moved closer anyway, drawn by something stronger than self-preservation. But what if some rules are meant to be broken? Rules like that get people killed in my world. Then maybe your world needs someone brave enough to change the rules. I was close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to smell his expensive cologne mixed with the antiseptic scent of healing wounds. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body as he struggled between what he wanted and what he thought was safe. Sara. My name was a warning and a plea. I'm not afraid of you, Ji-hoon. You should be. Why? Because you're dangerous? Because you've done terrible things? Because loving you could get me killed? I reached up to touch his face, feeling him tense under my palm. I've spent 6 months watching you be gentle with broken things. Watching you protect people weaker than yourself. Watching you try to heal from wounds that go deeper than anything I can bandage. You don't know what I've done. I know who you are now. I know you had my mother's medical files corrected so her death would be listed as natural causes instead of suicide, so my family wouldn't lose her life insurance. I know you paid the difference in her treatment costs without telling us. I know you've been having someone check on my younger brother at Howard University, making sure he stays safe and focused on his studies. His eyes widened slightly. How did you? Because I'm not stupid, and you're not as subtle as you think. I smiled, feeling reckless and alive. I know you care about me, Ji-hoon. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit it. He caught my hand against his face, his fingers warm and calloused. Admitting it puts you in danger. Denying it is killing us both. Sara. This time my name sounded like surrender. He pulled me against him, his mouth finding mine with desperate hunger, months of restraint and denied attraction exploding into something that felt like coming alive for the first time. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard, and I could see the war playing out in his expression. This changes everything, he said. Good. I was getting tired of pretending to be just your maid. That's when the alarms started. The house security system erupted into chaos as sirens wailing, emergency lights flashing, the kind of coordinated alert that suggested immediate threat. Through the kitchen windows, I could see armed figures moving across the grounds, professional and coordinated. Upstairs. Now. Ji-hoon's entire demeanor shifted, the vulnerable man replaced by the crime lord who'd built an empire through calculated violence. Safe room behind the bookcase in my office. Code is your mother's birthday. What about you? I handle this. He was already moving, pulling weapons from hidden compartments I'd never noticed. Sara, whatever happens, you stay hidden until I come for you. Ji-hoon. Whatever happens, he repeated, his voice carrying absolute authority, you do not come out until I personally confirm it's safe. I ran, my heart hammering as gunfire erupted behind me. The safe room was exactly where he'd said, equipped with monitors showing security feeds throughout the property. I watched as Ji-hoon and his people engaged attackers who moved with military precision. The assault lasted 20 minutes that felt like hours. When the gunfire finally stopped, I counted 8 unconscious figures zip-tied on the lawn and one man kneeling in the center of them all while Ji-hoon stood over him with controlled fury. Through the security feed, I could hear fragments of their conversation. Message from Tokyo, didn't think you'd fight for a black American maid, she's just a foreigner. Ji-hoon's response was too quiet to catch, but the man's face went white with terror. An hour later, Ji-hoon appeared at the safe room door, blood-stained but whole. I fell into his arms with relief so intense it made my knees weak. You're okay, I breathed against his chest. I'm okay. His arms tightened around me. But Sara, this is what my world looks like. People who try to hurt what's mine. Violence that follows me everywhere I go. I pulled back to look at him, seeing the fear and love warring in his expression. What's mine? You. The admission came out rough with emotion. God help me, you're mine, and that makes you a target. Then I guess we better make sure I know how to handle targets. Sara. No more running. No more hiding. No more pretending we don't care about each other. I met his eyes with steel I'd inherited from generations of black women who'd faced down worse than Korean gangsters. Rule 5 is officially broken. Now teach me how to survive in your world so I can stand beside you instead of hiding behind you. He stared at me for a long moment, seeing the determination in my expression. Then, incredibly, he smiled, the first completely unguarded expression I'd ever seen from him. You're going to be the death of me, Sara Williams. Or the life of you. I kissed him again, tasting promise and possibility despite the violence that surrounded us. Either way, I'm not going anywhere. But as we stood there planning our future together, neither of us noticed the message being transmitted from one of the unconscious attackers to his handler in Tokyo. Phase 1 complete. Target acquired emotional attachment as predicted. The American girl is the key to destroying Kang Ji-hoon. Her foreign status makes her legally vulnerable. Proceed to Phase 2. The real war was just beginning, and I was about to discover that sometimes being a black American in Seoul made you not just a target, but the perfect weapon to use against the man you love.